Thank you, everyone, for joining this morning to Building Resilient Supply Chains, Elevating Farming Women. We're thrilled to to welcome our guest speakers, Robina Najingo from Sukafina. She's the Global Gender Lead based in Rwanda, and Brooke Cantrell, who's the Vice President of Sustainability for West Rock Coffee. So thanks to both of you for being here and also welcoming the Equal Origins team, Greg Minahan and Becca Morahan, who will be working with me. I'm Kimberly Eason to facilitate the conversation today. We want to highlight first and foremost the purpose of the webinar, which is to really highlight opportunities for leadership on the issue of gender equity. How can we actually move gender equity from a sideline issue and opportunity into the strategic core of your operations as a company and organization? And then the second point is to showcase a blueprint for change. And this is using the Gender Equity Index to build a gender equity development plan. And so you'll see through examples from Robina and Brooke how this process actually works and can transform the way companies are working in sustainability with gender equity integration. So we recognize that there are a number of different kinds of people here with us in the webinar today. You might be a sustainability director needing to build your business case, so you need more data and more talking points for how to do that. You might be an executive seeking to have a more scalable approach to gender integration across your operations. You might be a project designer looking for how to better impact, have greater impact in your programming beyond just counting the number of people, the number of males and females in a training. And you might be a roaster or an exporter looking to apply a gender lens across your sourcing and sustainability programming. What we believe is that we can be more powerful working together across the sector when we have a shared language on gender equity, which can help clarify goals, align teams, and drive results. So we'll hear more of that from Robina and Brooke in today's presentation. We hope that by the end of today that you'll understand the business advantage for reaching women being more than half of the farm level workforce, that you'll recognize that there are skills and capacities your team needs to consistently reach and benefit women, and that you'll know how the Gender Equity Index can assess your current capacity and guide project investments and your next steps. So we look at the role of a sustainability lead and those involved in investing in and promoting and advancing sustainability, that there's a real conundrum that we recognize. And this conundrum is based on the fact that there are many competing priorities. You can see here the complexity of having deforestation, living income, child labor, all of these priorities that a sustainability leader is faced with addressing in their work. And gender equity, while known to be something that is also important, often is competing against these other sustainability priorities. And how this plays out is that when organizations and companies are designing sustainability projects and investments, the majority of focus and resources then goes into these components that are related to the core sustainability issues. So carbon management, good agricultural practices, nursery development, regenerative agriculture, and then a smaller amount of resources tends to be invested in gender equity. Those can be programs that are more siloed or on the margin. So women's leadership training, village savings and loan programs, women's coffees or women's cocoa brands. And so that ends up being a small amount that tends to stay sort of on the margins. And what we are espousing and promoting is that gender integration really is key to driving true sustainability. And that by bringing a gender equity lens across all of these major project components and program components, you're going to have better outcomes. And yes, still continuing the investment to empower women, but also ensuring that you reach and benefit women across all of your project and program components. The second part of the sustainability leaders conundrum is the need to work across many, many different partners, both private sector and development organization partners, government partners as well, and across multiple origins. And so how to bring together your programs in a way that can be systematic and scalable across these many different partners and regions, and do so with that gender approach. We assert that systematic gender integration is strategic, meaning it will help you achieve your business goals, and also scalable, that it is possible to have gender integration be scaled across all of your operations in a strategic, integrated way. And I'd like to invite Brooke Cantrell from WestRock to share a few observations, and to note that Brooke is also on the board of Equal Origins. Brooke?
Sure. Thanks, Kimberly, and thanks for letting me be on with you guys today. I think what I'd like to just quickly cover is why is gender equity essential, and what's the risk of not achieving it, really. So I believe the ICO stat or estimate is that 70% of the labor force in coffee in particular is women. So 70% of the labor force are women. That means the people working on the farms who are impacting or not impacting all of those things that Kimberly covered in the last couple of slides. Are women. So do they have access and equitable access to all of the services that are being provided within our coffee supply chains? And then another 25% of the global coffee farms are run by women. So a good quarter. Okay. So there's your numbers. That's, who is coming to training, who is not coming to training, who has access to financing, who does not. Those are important things to think about when we start to look at strategic and scalable approaches to systemic gender integration and its impact, whether or not it's in place, right? So my company in particular, I represent a coffee roaster and beverage solutions company, WestRock Coffee Company, and we have a vested interest in a lot of these farms. And through our work in a program called Ready Sustainability, and then alongside our sister company, Rwanda Trading Company in East Africa. And so for us, and just for my company in particular, we provide a lot of training and a lot of services so that farmers can grow more coffee and that we have access to that coffee, and we push that all the way through to our customers for shared value provision across the supply chain. So, for us, we are investing our dollars into these farms. So if we are not providing equitable access to these services across the labor, everyone who's working on these farms, then our investment our ROI is weaker. I mean, it's really that simple. And so because our ROI is higher yields, more coffee for us, sold to our customers. So from a company perspective, we want every hand that's working on that farm to have access to stuff like this. And then, Kimberly, I can hand it back over to you if and we can zoom out to a broader industry approach later, or we can cover that now as you prefer.
Let's cover that later on, Brooke. Thank you. Thanks so much for that. I'm going to turn it over to Becca to talk a bit about how we enhance sustainability outcome with a gender equity focus.
Thanks, Kimberly. And before we start, I'm so sorry. I think we've been trying to fix the settings so that people can put comments in the chat. We wanted to ask everyone to put their name and introduce themselves, but I think the Q&A function is working. So we'd really welcome any questions or comments as we go along in that using that function. And I'm so sorry that the chat doesn't seem to be open to everyone. We'll see. We'll keep trying to resolve it. But yeah, I just wanted to let people know. So yeah, we just wanted to set the scene around, why this piece around why, which Brooke just spoke to, why does this matter? How does it connect to the bottom line? How do we make the business case for investment in gender? Why does it make sense from these different perspectives? And we wanted to illustrate some of the ways that working on gender equity also helps you to achieve other outcomes relating to productivity and sustainability, which are the desired impacts of investment, these sort of broader investment in sustainability. And so we just wanted to highlight a couple of studies and for example, coffee in East Africa, these statistics were actually taken from a study in Uganda. As Brooke was saying, this particular study was demonstrating that women do more than half of the field work on coffee and 72% of the post-harvest work, which is so crucial to quality and productivity, and that men are essentially dominating in the marketing and controlling the income from coffee, which is a scenario I think a lot of us are familiar with. And so that the rewards that women get from the work that they're putting in are essentially negotiated within the household and maybe in kind. So women are working with an understanding that they're going to potentially secure a piece of land for themselves to work on, or land rights for their children, or the ability to get involved in farmer organizations potentially, but it's in kind and it's in a sense individually negotiated, and that structurally women are not accessing technical assistance or investment in sustainability directly, and that there is sometimes this situation of a kind of conflict or struggle around resources within the household, and anecdotal evidence of, for example, if cash flow is tight, that coffee might get sold earlier than is optimally by either women or men in the household in order to try and generate income in the short term. So there's this sense of the resources. There's a sort of power struggle around resources, and that effectively the investment that therefore is made is not reaching people in the household that are carrying out the work, and it doesn't allow for a kind of optimum use of resources, including land. And there's also really interesting studies to show that where there is investment in household cooperation, so sort of household approaches that bring women and men together, or approaches which allow for women to control land or to be involved more in decision making around the use of resources, that this produces the conditions and increases adoption of good sort of agricultural practices, and essentially creates an environment where there is a greater return on investment and a more sort of effective impact. So I'll just go to the next slide. And it's a similar situation in cocoa. So this particular study, which was done for the Fair Trade Foundation in 2020, was really illustrating clearly just how much dependence there is structurally on women's labour within the cocoa sector, demonstrating that it's not just women helping men, that actually women's labour is completely essential to cocoa. So any man that wants to get into cocoa farming or wants to intensify that or wants to expand the coverage or the number of farms that they run depend on women for the work they do in cocoa, obviously the work they also do in other kinds of crops and income generating activities. So they're really essential to cocoa production, but in a way that still can remain invisible when it comes to interacting with the market, when it comes to taking part even in research, policy decisions that are made, and that they are not accessing investments directly in training or other kinds of incentives. So this is a very similar situation in cocoa as well. Next slide. So our belief and our experience is that if there can be investment in the teams, in the origin teams that are working with farmers, whether they're in farmer organizations or service providers, there are established approaches and practices which these teams can become have the capacity to implement, and that really produces a much better return on investment in these sustainability investments. So examples are doing a value chain analysis in a participatory way that really highlights the value of the work that women and men are contributing, developing any kind of capacity building or training in a way that really takes into account learning styles and schedules and the kind of tasks that women and men are performing, really using extension services to really address specific barriers that women face and overcome them, and also hand in hand with looking at who's owning the assets, who's getting paid, and how that kind of joint decision making can be promoted within farming organizations and within households as well. And so these approaches exist and can be the teams can be trained in various approaches. So also, next slide, thank you. So the other aspect we wanted to highlight was just the work that's happening on forest conservation really benefits from a gender lens. Women and men have different ways of relating to and using forest resources. So often men might be involved more with logging activities and women potentially with marketing non-timber forest products, for example. And so there are really interesting approaches which work directly with women so that they can develop their income generating activities in a way that reduces deforestation, for example. And so that, there's some examples in Uganda where women were actively involved, sort of groups were formed and they were supported to plant an economic tree, which was sort of traditionally associated with men. It wasn't a tree that women were traditionally kind of permitted in terms of social norms to be involved in. But so the groups actually sort of shifted social norms around that and around women's leadership while also boosting food security. And there are similar examples in Brazil of these micro enterprises which help to reduce deforestation. And there's again established approaches that can really be used effectively. So when, for example, climate vulnerability assessments are performed to actually make sure that these are gender sensitive, recognizing that the vulnerability is very different, the concerns are different depending on the activities that women and men are carrying out and the kind of resources that they have access to. And also that there's this real opportunity to work with groups of women on peer learning and group approaches, both in terms of agroforestry and carbon management as well, which would be very effective. And lastly, I think there are several areas of human rights which are material in the context of coffee and cocoa production. And there are risks there. I think if these are not explicitly addressed, there are risks of human rights abuses occurring within supply chains in these areas. These are just some of the areas where that can take place. And at the same time, there is a real opportunity in engaging with these supply chains to engage with these issues and to really have an impact on minimizing the risk of human rights abuse. And I think one of the ways that we would frame this is that it's not only about systems for monitoring and reporting and redress, but it's also about really looking holistically at the structures that you're working in, at the environments that you're working in, and realizing that human rights abuses occur where there is an imbalance in power relations, broadly speaking. So, for example, if you have a workplace where there's no women in management, or if you have strong social norms governing the dynamics at a community level within households, there is a greater risk of women suffering human rights abuse. But gender approaches are one of the elements that can help to create an environment where power relations are made more equal, which can contribute to reducing the risk of human rights abuse. And I think a clear example of this is in the case of cocoa. There are several studies that point to this connection between women's economic empowerment and women having access, and control over income, and the kinds of outcomes relating to health and nutrition and education for children. And I think this particular study was also saying that if women can be involved in planning and selecting agricultural services, that has a positive impact on their incomes and reduces the risk of child labour. I'm conscious this is a lot of information, and I wanted to see if Robina wanted to add anything just from your own experience, because I'm talking in very general terms. I didn't know if there's anything that you wanted to add from the Rwandan context, Robina, on any of the points we touched on.
Just adding the Crusoe and women's empowerment, reducing child labor. When money is in hands of both men and women, it reduces child labor. So like in coffee production, we look at productivity and gender. How does gender increase production in the coffee sector? It's when we are sometime back when we had not put much effort in it, you find when you're calling people for trainings, capacity building, equip them with skills, give them farm inputs and equipment, when you call men, because they're the ones having land, they're the ones owning the farms. So they come for the trainings and they receive everything that is required of the farm. And yet implementation is done by women. So we make the woman implement, and then she's lacking the information, she's lacking the knowledge. So what do we expect from her? Implementing everything traditionally, the way she thinks things should be done, not in the right way. So gender connects directly with productivity, because when someone is equipped with knowledge and has the skills, then productivity can increase because she's doing everything professionally with the required inputs and equipment. Yes, that's what I want to just yes.
Great. So I think
yeah.
Am I handing back
Yeah.
to you, Kimberly? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Rabina. And I wanted to invite Brooke to comment as well from, being inside and leading inside of an important roaster. How do these different sustainability connection points that Becca just laid out with gender equity, how do they resonate, or what are the challenges that that you see, or opportunities that you see in your role and that others might be able to benefit from?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Becca, I think you did a really good job of showing there are a lot of areas that the coffee industry, the cocoa industries, and others need to address to have a viable future for our industries. And some of these are big problems, right? So climate change, soil loss, water scarcity, changing regulations or evolving regulations, yeah, climate change affecting yields. All of these things are they take an all hands on deck approach. And so, I think, and, personally, this is just me, this is not Westrock Coffee, but this is just me. Some of these things, not one singular industry can completely address, right? It takes a lot of industries working together to positively impact and control climate change, for instance. And so some of these things are a little bit out of our control to a degree, maybe not outside of our influence, but outside of our control. But across the board, there is one of these things we can influence, and that is gender equity. And can we not just make that like one thing that we can cross off of our list of obstacles standing in the way of like a viable industry future for coffee, for cocoa, for those of you who are on here in the cocoa industry and tea and etc. We are in an all hands on deck time or point in history. And so, just from again, I always go back to the ROI, what are you doing on the ground? And you can probably do it better and further if there's equity and access to services. And then from taking that all the way through to the customer, so I don't want to just put that big statement out there and just leave everyone on this call hanging. Kimberly and her team are about to take you through some Equal Origins tools that break all of this stuff down into bite-sized steps. And Robina's work has been incredible in the way that she's really harnessed these tools, and she'll detail that for you. So I'll leave that to them. But one thing that we have done is we've taken a couple of those tools and integrated that into Westrock Coffee's Raiz sustainability program. And so we serve brands. And so for us, being able to integrate those tools into our own program allowed us in part to become recognized by the Global Coffee Platform's sustainability reference tool. That alone makes us more marketable to more people, because that is an industry recognized program alongside a lot of other fantastic programs and certification standards. And so I think, facing forward to the brands and being able to push that from the roaster perspective to the brands and say that we have a gender equity lens linked within our program, and that program is recognized by an industry platform. It's a pretty marketable tool. So I'll hand this back to Kimberly, but I think Becca has done a really excellent job of helping us see when you remove gender obstacles, how, all of these things that you can address.
Thank you, Brooke. Well said. So as we move forward, Brooke's words help us to recognize the important role that companies have and individuals inside each company. We recognize that this is a very complex system, and that if you see here on this graphic, you can see what are traditionally understood to be the 5 dimensions of gender common in agriculture. So you see these different, interconnected circles and connection points of decision making and employment and land rights, and really where the industry is and has been most focused is on this area of productive resources, and especially training and capacity building. And so there's a significant opportunity for those companies and organizations that are investing in productive resources, in training and education and capacity building and extension services, to bring that gender lens. And by bringing that gender lens, it also begins to open up greater understanding of the other 4 dimensions, right? So by getting closer to the needs and the aspirations of women farmers inside of the farming families can really help to better understand the impact of more equitable decision making, women having access to land rights, more equitable division of household labor, and those things. And what we know inside of most agriculture sectors, but specifically in coffee and cocoa, is that there is already investment being made at the corporate level, where you've got human resources policies and diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, which now are even more under threat, and some companies are rolling those back. But still, there are laws that often require companies to take gender equity into account and human rights into account at the corporate level. In response to the growing need and awareness to focus on what's happening in farming communities and gender equity at the farming community level, companies have invested directly in some of these programs that we mentioned earlier, like village savings and loan programs and women's leadership trainings and focus products by women. And that has been sort of the core way that companies have responded to date. And what we are proposing and starting to encourage with this process of the Gender Equity Index and the Gender Equity Development Plan is that companies as well, like Brooke was highlighting, can invest directly in the teams that are working on the ground. So part of the Raiz program, as an example, or the Sukafina East Africa team really investing, Sukafina corporate investing in their origin teams to build that capacity so that they're better equipped to respond directly to the needs of the farming communities and farming families. And so this is really the way for at the corporate level to have more impact, because you're moving your origin teams and shifting the way that they work to be more gender equitable, as well as still investing in direct impact at farming households and communities. And Brooke, I think you had something else you wanted to add here, or did we get it in the earlier comments?
I think I looped it all together once I started
Okay,
going.
perfect.
Sorry.
Okay, great. Great. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to apply this approach to systematization and scale. And Becca, were you going to do this part, or do you want?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, great.
I'm happy to.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. We just wanted to say a bit about some of our thinking behind the tool and give a bit more information about the Gender Equity Index tool, and also about a workshop, an online workshop we've developed to support this capacity building of origin teams. So I think our vision, in a sense, and our hope is that these tools and this workshop can help the sector as a whole to develop a shared language. So I think obviously there's a lot of awareness of this. There's a lot of really excellent, interesting work happening in different origins, but obviously the context really varies. And I think our understanding still around some of the language that we use around gender equity, can vary. And I think we're interested to see how we can develop this shared language and this way of talking about gender equity together within the coffee and cocoa sectors. And we're interested to see, can we develop some tools and processes which are standardized, which can be rolled out, that are fairly time efficient, but that generate these tailored results. So obviously not, this in terms of the actual solutions and the actual approaches, that's got to be completely tailored and adopted to each context. But our interest is in developing some tools that can be used, for example, with a global organization or a global company, that they could use within each of their country teams, for example. And our aim is to allow a degree of benchmarking, I think, to begin with internally, although the report that's generated from the Gender Equity Index, which kind of helps you to see where you're at, does give you a kind of indication of how you compare to other service providers globally, but there's nothing kind of publicly available on that at the moment. It's more about you being able to benchmark, okay, where were we last year, where are we now, or where are we in that team versus this team, so that it sort of helps you to kind of have some way of benchmarking your progress. And our aim is to support this integration, not seeing work on gender purely as a standalone area, although that the sort of depth work and the standalone approach is really valuable, but to say actually it's something that needs to be this kind of lens across all of the sustainability work. So that's the aim. So this is just a bit of an illustration of where we want to get to, rather than thinking about gender purely in terms of projects. What we want to support is this integration across a team. So thinking about an origin team, for example, whether that's in a farmer organization or in a service provider, ideally we want that leadership commitment at every level, ideally, and the ability to integrate gender into budget. So to have the ability to track expenditure, again, not just on projects, but to really be able to start to quantify, what are the additional investments we might need to make? How could those investments potentially be spread across projects? Does it actually cost more to do things differently? Or, what is that cost? So, having that kind of visibility within reason. Obviously, you can't track everything, but that kind of clarity and analysis, because I think that would really enable companies to be able to also speak about that as a kind of point of difference. This is what we're investing. To be able to have an approach to building staff capacity, particularly those people that are engaging directly with farmers, but actually across the teams, everybody's function is important, and to have some sort of approach to internal communications on gender, and to have a policy or an action plan in place, that's actionable with deliverables and indicators of change. And then to be able to have gender integrated into programs and services, so to have gender analysis, in a sense, inform all of the programs and services, so that they do respond to women's and men's needs and interests. And finally, a manageable approach to MEL, so an approach which enables people to track not only we're reaching this many women, but we can perhaps choose and track certain key indicators that are important in our context around, how does that help women, and, you know, what are the benefits, or how are we empowering women? To you know, routinely be gathering and analyzing the data that's gathered from women and men, not only on their participation, but also on their feedback as well. So that's the sort of vision of change, what we're working towards. And there is an established framework that underpins the Gender Equity Index. So this is the Reach, Benefit, Empower and Transform framework, which was originally developed by IFPRI and later developed further by CGR. So it was originally applied to agricultural development projects, but we felt it was a really good fit for service providers because for two reasons. One is that it helps to really clarify the relationship between your objectives, your strategies, and your indicators of change. So sometimes there can be confusion. You might be mainly working on, for example, talking about we've reached this number of women, but you might be talking about, you know, we've empowered women, but actually, you know, what are your indicators of empowerment? That might be different from your indicators for reach, for example. And it's very common, although there are not hard and fast divisions between them. This framework helps us to get really clear, you know, what are we working on, and also just in recognition that different service providers have different priorities. So not all service providers will be working towards gender transformation, which is a kind of really deep change in gender norms, but others might be, and you know, might have that kind of focus, and you know, be working with men, for example, on attitudes towards women's participation, or might be working with couples approaches, whereas others that maybe are working at a greater scale might say, actually, our aim is to reach more women, and that in particular context is already a very radical step in context with very strong traditional gender norms. Actually, just to reach women might, you know, be enough of a focus. So I think this framework enables us to sort of meet service providers where they are and help them to identify their next steps. And so the index itself has 5 domains, and it gives has questions under each of these thematic domains. So you get a score for each domain as well as an overall score. So the first 2 are more the kind of architecture and sort of resource that you have internally. So the organizational capacity might be, you know, to what extent you have a committed leadership, and to what extent you have policies and some kind of approach to training and investment in your staff on this topic. And the second one on strategy and analysis analyzes to what extent you do carry out a kind of contextual gender analysis, and to what extent you have an approach that's really rooted in the reality of where you're working. And then the Reach, Benefit, Empower and Transform sections are closely linked to the Reach, Benefit, Empower and Transform framework, in terms of that's much more to do with, you know, how are you reaching women, and, you know, how do you go about evaluating that, and the same with Benefit and Empower and Transform as well. So the idea with the tool is that it generates you a tailored report, and so the way that we work with teams when we do the workshop process with them is that is essentially the starting point. It's a jumping off point to then develop what we call a gender equity development plan, which is a tailored plan that enables you as a team to say, okay, you know, these are the things we're doing really well in each of these areas. You know, these are the things perhaps that we'd like to work on. You know, what makes sense to focus on for the next couple of years. You know, let's build in these actions towards greater gender equity. So that's the process that we take the teams through. So yeah, I'll hand back to Kimberly, I think, to give a bit of an overview of that workshop process.
There we go. Okay, thank you, Becca. Yeah, so we're going to talk a bit about how we can go about building the capacity of service providers. And we designed a workshop back in 2022 at the request of some of our partners. They recognized the power of the tool, but then we're concerned that if they just had the report, that report might just sit on the shelf. So really what we realized was necessary was this moving from the Gender Equity Index report into the Gender Equity Development Plan that Becca just highlighted. So the workshop series was launched in 2022, and we've worked with a number of different companies, including Sukafina. You'll hear Robina talk more about that process. We've also worked with ECOM across 8 of their different country teams, and the Neumann Foundation and a number of others. So it is a process that works across different kinds of organizations, including producer organizations as well. The process is 5 weeks. It's online. They are virtual sessions of 90 minutes each with assignments in between the sessions. And so you can see the flow of the content. And so it's not only the design of the gender equity development plan as the deliverable, but really there is capacity building of the team happening along each step through the conversations, through the facilitated dialogue, and through the assignments and the tailored one-on-one sessions. And this is the process. Robina will talk a little bit about this, but we have different tools that help get teams from the analysis of the Gender Equity Index into the Gender Equity Development Plan, and really ensuring that it's well informed and really this co-creation with the team so that it makes it more sustainable in terms of its implementation. And then the process really is to go from the index and the plan and the focus on gender responsive budgeting that Becca highlighted, and ensuring that plans projects are designed and programs are designed with this gender equity lens and with resources allocated, so that then when teams go to do the implementation, they are actually doing it in a gender equitable way. And so over time, that's going to influence the Gender Equity Index score, and you'll see improvements in that score. And that's really where we see the power of communication and market linkage. So many, most development organizations and trading companies with the teams on the ground are looking for support and resources from bilateral development funding, from roasters and cocoa brands, in order to be able to really fund the work in addition to their own resources. So the way that that teams and companies are then able to speak about their gender equity journey really is a powerful way to leverage the shared language that more roasters and brands are beginning to be able to understand, and then see the value of potential investments in this kind of work. And so when we look at the idea of really being a more systematic and scalable approach, if you think, Brooke, for example, working with her RAIS partners, so that if her different partners have that gender equity development plan, she can actually see where it might make sense for her to invest. We see the same with how e-com is working across all of their different cocoa regions, and maybe Rubina will touch on this point as well, that you can actually see from a central point of view, okay, what's happening in these different origins and with these different teams, and use that to inform your investments and your global approach. And so I'm going to turn over to Robina and Greg for this next section to really hear a very clear case of how the program and the approach has been supporting efforts to be more gender equitable.
Thanks, Kimberly. And Rubina, thank you for joining us today. Really have appreciated working with you. And I think, the idea we're talking about this, we use this word a lot, integration, and, as opposed to a standalone siloed project. And so, a very clear and simple example of this integration is when an agroforestry project includes staff training for specific gender awareness, gender strategies, gender accommodating, potentially even pedagogical training for the team in terms of participatory facilitation. So you can see in this way that a project that is supporting agroforestry can also begin to carry some water for gender equity. And so that's what we're looking for in this process is what are the activities and how do we incorporate those activities into our existing annual work plans as well as into our sustainability projects. And that's the investment that Kimberly was referring to in terms of being able to assist somebody like Brooke to be able to specifically say, hey, where is the gender approach in this agroforestry project, in this carbon management project? Where are we investing specifically in the implementation team to ensure gender equity is happening? So along those lines, one of the benefits of this is to help to address that conundrum that Kimberly was talking about, the complexity of this. And Rabina has several East African country teams that she's working with in coordinating a variety of projects. And so I'd like to invite Rabina to talk a little bit about how the GEI process really helped you to assess your current situation. So you had 5 countries. Each country was in a different place in terms of their experience, in terms of the opportunities that they had. So could you talk a little bit about that process and what that was like across your country teams?
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg, and thank you also to the team. Yes, the Gender Equity Index assessment was a very good and useful tool for us because it was a starting point for us actually to find out what are we doing and how are we doing it. Yeah, when we are answering that assessment tool, we are able to find out what are we doing, to which level. Are we advanced? Are we at the basic level? Are we doing it better? Are we making any difference in the lives of farmers we are supporting, the coffee communities? So from it, we really found out we have some work done, but actually had a lot of areas to improve. From the areas of improving, then we start as a team. We design the SWOT analysis. What are our weaknesses? What are our strengths? What are the external factors that are impeding our work on the field? And also in our company, as a company that is dealing with coffee, we are coffee sellers, but we take a social responsibility for the coffee communities, the farmers. So what are we doing for both the company, but also the coffee communities where we get which is the push for the business. So from the SWOT analysis, well discussed, different ideas from different groups of people, we are able to design theories of change for different countries because although we are in East Africa, our contexts are somehow different, our perspectives are different, the approaches are different, but we are all focusing on coffee communities. So we designed a theory of change, looking into what impact, what change do we actually want to see in the coffee communities? How are we reaching that change that we need? What activities should we be doing to have the change we need in the coffee communities? Because, like I said some time back, gender affects our productivity in the coffee communities as well as the company level. So we designed that sort of theory of change, and later on from the theory of change, we looked at the activities we have, and then we designed the gender equity development plans. The gender equity development plans was a list of activities, depending on what we actually want our coffee communities to look like. How much production do we need? How do we have that production? How do we keep the business moving when everything, when we actually have both men and women on board, but when they are all well equipped in terms of promoting this equity. I think you know what equity means, giving fair, being fair to everyone so that we have that equality. Without equity, you never achieve equality. So, we designed the East Africa and the Global Gender Strategy. Actually, this working like our guidelines. What should we do? What should we do? Where do we start? Where do we end? Who should be involved? Who needs to be brought on board? That's our gender strategy. So The East Africa, I mean, the gender equity development plans help us to know what we do and how do we prioritize our work. How do we prioritize our work depending on the need we have for both staff as well as both communities. Yes. Next slide. Yes. Both our global and East Africa gender strategy, we have three pillars. Actually, these ones are helping us to evaluate ourselves. On this pillar, how far have we gone? What are the challenges we have? And who else should we bring in to support us in terms of strengthening our work, but also managing what we are having as our activities. So we have these three pillars. One is gender mainstreaming, because actually what we saw was non-people do not like gender in the workplace or in the coffee communities, but it's about lack of awareness. How do we create this awareness? How do we raise awareness? How do we have everyone understand the need for gender in the business setting? Yes. So under gender mainstreaming, we have lots of things. We have capacity building, we have awareness raising. We also have recruitment, increasing representation of women on farm level, but also at the staff, the organization level. We also have designing and updating our policies. Yes, sometime back we had a policies designed, but when we went into the Better Together program, we realized that we are missing some things, especially when I look at reach, benefit, and empower and transform. We try to bring in that concept. How do we reach women? Is it about increasing representation only, but is it about numbers? It's beyond that. It's beyond numbers. It's beyond representation. It also goes further to benefit. How do we benefit these people that we are working with? What are we doing for them? And if we're doing something for them, is it benefiting the organization? Is it pushing business forward? Are we overcoming some challenges that we had before we had these people? How do we have a big group of talents at the organization level? Yes, so we have those under gender mainstreaming. And when we come to gender transformation, it's very important and actually not so easy to achieve, because like if we fail to have gender mainstreaming, people being aware of the concept and its importance, then you can never have the gender transformation. How do you make this the husband of a woman really understand that this woman needs to be involved at all levels in the coffee production? How do we make the man understand that there's need for a woman is having access, but does she have the control over the resources? And if she has the control over the resources, what are the benefits for the household? What are the benefits for the company if women have control over the company resources? So the gender transformation, under that we have a lot of activities, but mostly we look into couple trainings. We look into men giving some parts of land to women. We look into different things, and we look also into men engaged program. Yeah, so when we go to women economic empowerment, this one we've been trying, but when we don't have gender transformation, also women economic empowerment becomes a bit difficult for implementation. In this one, where we looked into how women have access to income, where Becca and Brooke talked about and Kimberly talked about the village savings and loan associations having easy access to loans, and then they invest in businesses so that they have this power, the power that helps them to minimize the gender imbalances in homes, but also have a say in the household. I think that when you have money, then you have a say. So you don't beg, sometimes you don't violate your rights and not violated sometimes. We have tried to design the proposals for women community empowerment in different countries. We also look into income generating activities for women, support them to design proposals themselves, and then they also implement the income generating activities. Yeah, those three main pillars, we have lots of activities under them, and each activities we have each pillar has different performance indicators where we evaluate ourselves. How far have we worked on?
Rubina,
Where are
there's
the challenges? Yes.
sorry to interrupt. There's a little background noise, and I'm wondering if you could hold if it helps to hold your microphone closer to your mouth, maybe just when you're talking. There's just a little background noise. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, whatever we're doing, be it service provision, be it pillars, how do we gender mainstreaming, how do we do our work? We try to find out how are we doing the work and what are the challenges. So in this, we get feedback from the beneficiaries, the coffee farmers, but also we sometimes do small focus group discussions, we do interviews, when we go to field trainings, it's just like a free talk, a free discussion to really find out how do they perceive our services, how are they benefiting from what we're doing, and from them we get some issues, and from those answers we go back and then we define for our work to be sustainable. We are trying to work with local leadership in terms of consultation meetings, but also engaging them on project implementation to actually let them know what you're doing, and if the project ends, they have to continue with it in different ways. We also try to involve women in leadership positions for village savings and loan associations and produce organizations, and we do this following our country gender policies. For example, in Rwanda, Burundi, it's 30% women leadership, but when you go to Kenya, it's 2/3. So recently I was in Kenya and in cooperatives, they were saying 2/3 in leadership for women is too much. And actually when we counted, it was too much. So we said, here we shall do an affirmative action for women to be involved, but also we look into what is feasible as a starting point, but we shall increase to reach the 2/3 as stipulated in the gender policy program. Because whatever we are doing, we're following the national policies for our countries. So in Tanzania, it's also 30%. So we do 30% for cooperatives, we do 30% for village savings and loan associations, we do 30% for every leadership committee. And environment through income generating activities. We're trying to go beyond the caregiving projects, like these care projects that support women into those traditional roles, but going beyond and go to business. For example, now in Rwanda we are implementing a free project from Women Win. We are trying to do other businesses for women so that they get supplementary income for the coffee. They are now going to do mushroom growing for business. They do liquid soap making for business. And then that income is supplemented in the income they get from coffee. Yes, that's quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's okay, yes.
I think I could make a point here, and I didn't have to ask Rubina a single question about what she was working on. She's really covered very comprehensively sort of the strategy, but I think I want to just call out attention to how these plans that she's talking about include activities that are designed to increase the impact and effectiveness of the team, as well as things like BSLAs and these standalone projects as well. So she's really balancing her portfolio of activities between capacity building, awareness of the team, understanding the specific constituents that we're working with here. What is the context for women in our particular area, as well as bringing in some additional supports, things like leadership opportunities. And for instance, that, one of the most powerful gender transformative strategies that organizations like Robina are able to introduce is women in positions of training, right, as trainers. So women as agronomists, women as technicians, women show up as competent experts in their field. That really does begin to shift those deeply held beliefs and ideas. And this isn't just shifting these beliefs and ideas for men, it's also shifting these ideas and beliefs for women, and the idea of seeing role models and other and women in these positions of authority and competence are a key strategy to really turning the tide. So I really really appreciate your input and the way she's tracking this. The other piece too is just being able to track the progress of 5 different teams across so many different aspects, where you're looking at human resources, you're looking at training materials, you're looking at such a wide range of gender disaggregated monitoring and evaluation. So how does a person like Robina track that progress across 5 different teams? And the Gender Equity Index report is helping her to do that.
Thank you, Greg. It's saying, like Greg is saying, it's been helpful to have the Gender Equity Index development plan, because we know what we have as a long list of activities we have to do. Under each pillar, as I said, the gender mainstreaming, gender transformation, and women economic empowerment. So from that long list, depending on the validity of the budget, but also depending on the priority we have, we select activities by quarter of what activities should we implement that are feasible, but also that are priorities for our organization, to keep the business moving, but also to keep the social responsibility for our farmers. Again, when I go back to how do you connect gender with productivity, you find like the International Labor, the International Coffee Organization report says 70% of women work on the coffee farm, but they really get they earn 10% of the income from the coffee. So how do you bridge that gap, and how do you increase production when gender equality is promoted? We look into the number of women. If their contribution is 7%, and they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the skills, they don't have the required equipment and materials, do we expect them to really give the production we want? So we want to look into that. And then on the company level, when we miss out people, when we look into, we are not recruiting women, because recruiting women requires a lot of things. We need a space, we need the maternity leaves, we need ABCD. What if she goes for maternity? I also have those, I've been receiving such comments. They say, number one, it's a gender-based violence if you don't recruit women because she's a woman. Yeah, she has the right to work. The fact that she has the qualifications, she's ready to work. If she's ready to work, then she should do, if she passes the interview, and then she has a requirement for the job. So it's gender equality. It's about talking with HRs, understanding management, the leadership, their commitment. Do they really understand the concept and the importance of gender equality in the organization? And missing out the point, do they see the impact of that?
Thank you. Thank you, Rubina. Thank you so much for that insight, and I just want to commend you and your team. Rubina has invited me to a team meeting where I saw them all coordinating their activities, commenting on their progress, and it was just fantastic to see, and I expect to see continued progress from your teams. Good work. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Rovina and Greg. I think it was a terrific example of exactly how this process works. So well done. We're excited to have Sukafina continue to be a partner. I also do want to highlight on the cocoa side, our strongest partner to date has been Ecom, and they are applying the Gender Equity Index across all of their cocoa supply origins, and have developed KPIs aligned with the Gender Equity Index to track and report progress. So we're very excited about the work we've been able to do with them and their leadership in the cocoa sector. We're getting close to our time, so I'm gonna just wrap with a couple of slides and an invitation for what's next. So you really have heard a lot of the business case as well as the human rights case for investing in gender equity, and really finding the ways to ensure that farming women have equal opportunity to advance and to thrive. So we invite all of you to advocate within your organizations and beyond for policies and funding that will help us to achieve greater gender equity across the sector. Looking at where you can make a commitment within your particular role and company, and continue to engage in dialogue with service providers. I think Brooke has highlighted really clearly the opportunity and the importance of inviting your supply chain partners to really take this approach on board and take it seriously to have a more gender responsive approach. And then we can help. The Gender Equity Index is free, so we invite everyone to take the Gender Equity Index. We have a QR code that you can snap, and a next opportunity to bring everybody back together. But I just wanted to highlight that in addition to the work that we do with teams with the Better Together workshop, we have a series of other services that we offer, and these really are helping teams to implement their plans and to make progress on those plans. Because we're short on time, I won't go into more detail, and we did have a couple of questions which have been answered in the chat. If you do have other questions, please put them in the chat and we can respond via email. I want to finish on time as we committed to 15 minutes after the hour. So just quickly, do want to invite you to what's next. The Gender Equity Index is free, so please jump in and sign up for the demo service provider or demo producer organization diagnostic, and download your report, review it, study it. It's really quite a wealth of information. Sarah's going to pop the link to both of these in the chat. And then we will have a follow-up opportunity. So our idea is that those of you that are on the call, take the Gender Equity Index, and then next month we'll come back together and we'll really guide you through the way to analyze the recommendations from the report into what would be the foundation for your gender equity development plan. Brooke highlighted that the having a plan in place is part of the Global Coffee Platform equivalency mechanism. Having a plan in place is more and more something that is requested by roasters and brands across the board. So you have the two links there in the chat, and please do feel free to follow up with us. You have my email there. You'll have the April 9th session, and we'll be at the Specialty Coffee Expo. We have a panel on Friday morning at 11:30 together with a couple of other industry allies. So if you're going to be in Houston, please join us there, and we look forward to following up with you virtually or in person soon. And thanks again so much to Robina and to Brooke for joining us and sharing their direct experience with advocating and implementing gender equity programming and the kind of impact that you're having. We're so grateful to have you as our allies, and also to the Equal Origins team and to all of you for joining us today. We know that you have a lot going on in your busy sustainability lives, and we're grateful that you took time to be with us. So we'll have the recording available for you to also circulate, and we look forward to seeing you on April 9th and also hopefully in person. So thanks so much, everyone.